Hello, my name is Rena Youngblood. I'm the Executive Director here at the Computer Museum of America, located just north of Atlanta in Roswell, Georgia. Welcome, 2020 Catalyst Game participants. We are so excited to be participating in the games this year as one of the nonprofits, and really happy to have you joining us today to see a couple of videos that we're doing here in the museum. The mission here at the Computer Museum of America is to ensure that computer and technology artifacts are preserved, to be studied, to be seen, to be used in education, STEAM education. I say STEAM because obviously we are going to have science and technology and engineering and math, but there's an arts component here too. Even the artifacts that you see, the practicality and the artistry of putting these pieces together is really, really beautiful. Our vision is to inspire the next great what if. Now, yes, it would be terrific to have the next person who has the disrupting product that comes to market say they had their idea, their inspiration while being at the Computer Museum of America. But we really believe that even the 6- or 7-year-old who sees something and begins to ask the question, well, I wonder if, could it do that? Maybe I could invent something that does it. That is something that we strive to do each and every day. So with your help, we will continue to push forward and do the things that we want to do here at the museum. Now, the 2 videos that you are going to be watching today, one is going to be on gaming, and we have terrific guest speakers for that. It'll be the history, the present, and then the future of gaming. The second piece is going to be in our supercomputing exhibit area, and we have one of the largest collections of supercomputers in the world. And we, once again, have some fantastic people to walk you through that piece. So sit back, enjoy, watch the videos and get your points. I hope you'll consider playing for Computer Museum of America when you start the competition season in October. Thank you.
Hey, welcome. I'm here at the Computer Museum of America. My name is Ben Lewin, and I have a company called New Earth Entertainment where we develop and publish video games. Now, I first got my start in the gaming industry really back when I was a child, playing video games and falling in love with virtual worlds. But as I grew older and my skill sets hardened and I started to become more interested in what this world was doing in the industry of entertainment, I started to learn programming and art skills and things like that and develop my own video games. So what is gaming, though, you may ask? And really you can break it down into something very esoteric, which is interaction. Gaming has something that no other medium has, and that is this element of interaction. Interactivity of painting, you view and you appreciate it. Same with a TV show or a film, a book. These are all passive mediums. But gaming has this really unique element to engage people directly. And I think that's very powerful. And you can see that in different industries where gaming can help teach young children and young adults and even older adults how to problem solve, math skills, programming, different kinds of software engineering and hacking. It can teach you working together as a team, collaborative efforts, how to drive a car, how to handle weaponry, how to operate on a patient in a doctor's office. So all of these skill sets where we came from a very old school and rudimentary age of pixels and coins, now we have these full virtual reality experiences where you can simulate being in a doctor's office or a surgical room and performing a surgery. And this can lead to very beneficial experience that you can take with you into a career in the military or in the medical field or in software, finance, you name it. So what better place to start in this topic than the grandfather of video games? Many histories of different technologies, some of the starting and stopping points are blurry, but if you want to start in what is the first and definitive console, gaming console that people could take home back in the day, it would be the Magnavox Odyssey. And this was engineered by Ralph Baer, an American-German engineer back in 1972, and was put out by Magnavox. Now, of course, this is very rudimentary and not many people remember this as well as the Atari 2600 or the Nintendo Entertainment System, but it was important because it pioneered the very start of a concept that really took the world by storm, is that people could have a entertainment set-top box within their own homes. They didn't have to go to an arcade, they didn't have to pay money, they just did a one-time fee to purchase the entertainment device and they had it, they owned it. And you'll see, obviously, throughout the decades that that has become the new standard. And so this Magnavox Odyssey set that standard. Now, the video game timeline wouldn't be complete without mentioning Nolan Bushnell. So, of course, Ralph Baer kicked things off, but Nolan Bushnell was the pioneer, the seasoned veteran of his time. He was the creator of Atari and, of course, of a couple games, just a little game called Pong, Breakout. You've probably heard of these. Now, the Atari 2600 took the world by storm. I mean, this was the most accessible gaming home console that was out there at the time. And of course, they had their competitors, but if you told, a 12-year-old back in the 1980s that he could have an arcade-like experience in the comfort of his own home, well, that's what happened, during all of the Christmases throughout the early 80s. Now, of course, no big fad is without its downfall, and there was a time where video games were thought of just as a fad. And one particular game is infamous for pushing that scale, tipping it, and causing what's known as the crash of the video game industry in 1983. And that was a little game called E.T. This was based off of the movie, of course, the Spielberg film, and the programmer only had 5 weeks to program it to make it in time to get to store shelves by that Christmas. And of course, 5 weeks is not time to do much of anything, and it was a huge flop, and it began to destroy the idea that maybe these aren't true and faithful arcade ports. They're just trying to get money out of you, and they're just pushing games out there. Pac-Man was another port that was particularly bad on the Atari 2600. So for a long time, video games lay dormant until a small, you've probably heard of them, small little giant of a company called Nintendo came in 1985 and totally turned things around.
My name is Todd Harris. I am probably best known for co-founding a video game studio in the Georgia area called High Res Studios. And today I run an eSports production company called Skillshot Media. I just want to share with you all a bit about my background, a bit about why video games matter, the future of gaming and esports, and a couple thoughts on career opportunities for students related to gaming. So first, my background. 7th grade me was very video game obsessed. This was early 80s when gaming was coming onto the scene. And I had a couple really formative experiences with gaming. The first was when Space Invaders showed up at the Pizza Hut in my neighborhood, and I was playing that with my father. And even those old school video games, the idea of me and my father playing together was all about social bonding with this most important person in my life. And so from the very beginning, gaming was about social connection. My dad happened to be a programmer at IBM for about 30 years, and we were fortunate because he brought home one of the first batches of IBM PCs to our house. It was literally a lottery, and we drew a lucky number, and we got one of those first PCs, and I was so obsessed with games, I taught myself to program because I wanted to grow up and make video games because I'd already played all the ones that were out there. So this second experience with gaming was around education. It for me was a gateway for learning computer programming, coding, and I really credit a lot of my career success to being fortunate to have that access to his tutelage and to an IBM PC. So gaming, connection, education. So let's fast forward a little bit to today. I studied computer science, got a degree in computer science, I worked doing business software, I founded a video game company, and now I do esports. Gaming has progressed a lot since the 7th grade Todd experience. It's now actually the biggest entertainment media on the planet. So not movies, not music. You have to take the entire film industry, the entire music industry, put those together. Video games is larger. $140 billion globally. It's also growing still on every platform. It's growing on the PC. It's growing on that box you have in your living room, whether it's Xbox or Sony or Nintendo Switch. It's growing the fastest on this computing device we all have in our pocket. And it's also growing on brand new innovative technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality. So future of gaming is very, very bright commercially in terms of revenue generated. It's also now turned a corner where it's not just people playing video games, it's people watching other people play video games. I know it blows your mind a little bit. Your kid, your grandkid maybe plays Fortnite and you don't get it because they're also watching people play Fortnite on platforms like YouTube and Twitch. Well, believe it or not, on a platform like Twitch, which is where people watch other people play video games, that audience on a monthly basis is bigger than ESPN already. It's bigger than CNN already. So it's not like this is the future. This is already here where people enjoy watching people perform. Now, why is that? It sounds crazy. Why are they watching? Why are they not just playing themselves? Well, I'll ask you the same question about golf that you might watch, or even football. Probably one of the biggest comparisons would be a sport like NASCAR or Formula Racing, where you have a combination of a person and a machine executing a competitive task. It certainly requires a great deal of mastery and practice. In the case of eSports or competitive gaming, it also requires teamwork. Most of these games are team-based, and so it requires not only individual performance, but communicating with different people with different roles to accomplish a goal, and it's super entertaining. You have large production teams behind the event that make it interesting to watch. If you throw back to something like poker that used to be played in basements and maybe a little bit in Vegas, once they added really interesting production elements, you had things like the World Series of Poker being on ESPN, because now you could see the cards that he has in his hands, and that added an element of intrigue, and people started to watch, and poker grew. So you're seeing the same sort of thing happening with eSports. This has yielded to events like the Fortnite World Cup, which I was fortunate to attend. This event, over a course of a year, had $100 million allocated to it. And in a single night in Arthur Ashe Stadium, in front of about 10,000 live fans, a 16-year-old kid who no one had heard of the day before walked away with $3 million. Suddenly, Booga, that's his handle, was on The Tonight Show that night, on The Today Show the next day. And now every day you can see him streaming on the platform Twitch, continuing to build fandom, continuing to have new Fortnite players watch him and think, maybe next year I can be on that stage. This is another element why eSports is growing so quickly, because it's so aspirational. Any kid, no matter where you grow up, any place in the world with enough time and practice and access to an internet connection and a PC, you could be the very best. You can't actually say that with traditional sports. I wasn't born as tall as our friend Benjamin to be able to play basketball. I don't have the build of a linebacker. Think of a kid who might want to play hockey, but they don't have an ice rink in their neighborhood. That lack of access will mean they never get to experience that. But the land that we're living in, the time that we're living in, every kid has a computing device in their pocket, and more internet is becoming accessible around the world. And once that access is there, eSports will just continue to grow, because it's kind of the ultimate democratic activity. Now, let's talk a little bit about careers. eSports is here, the future's super bright, it's just gonna keep growing. How does that matter to you, the viewer, or maybe your kid, or your grandkid, your neighbor? The nice thing is, while folks like Booga get all the attention, for every competitive player earning millions of dollars or simply just following their passion and earning an okay living, there are many more kind of behind the scenes and around that person helping to support them. In the same way you hear about LeBron James, but you know he has a lawyer, he has an agent, he has a social media manager, he has a camera team that follows him around. There's the entire NBA, there's the team, there's a coach. So there's so many careers that come around supporting the one who is in the spotlight. And this is really the phase that we're in with both gaming and esports. So right now, the celebrity superstar performers are getting a lot of the attention. but it's just the 1% of the 1% that will be good enough to play at that level. But if you follow your passion around gaming, it tends to open up these other doors. You could work as a camera person. You could work as a coach of a professional player. You could work as a team manager, as a social media manager. You could work as a commentator. Believe it or not, these esports events, they have suit and tie, play-by-play, and color commentary just like the NBA or the NFL. And so you can follow your passion and work within the esports industry. The other nice thing is even if you don't get a job in gaming or esports, when you learn these skills, when you learn computer coding, when you learn digital art, when you learn film production, these tend to be the sort of skills that are just needed in the next generation workforce. And so just like myself, 7th grade me learned programming thinking I'm gonna make games. I did get to do that, but the first 15 years of my career, I was doing business software. But that was a great job. I was earning a great living, and eventually a door opened and I got to do games. So I encourage all of you to keep following your passion, continue to learn about gaming and esports, and I think it'll lead you to good things. Thanks.
So, Todd, if you would just kind of tell us a little bit about esports, and for some of our audience kind of who doesn't necessarily know exactly what esports entail.
Yeah, great question. So esports, short version is it's games played at a competitive level, often in front of spectators. So games is a spectator sport. And as you know, I guess even going back to arcade days, these machines behind us, there's always an innate nature to compete when skill is involved. It's just a human drive. So when I was growing up, it was Casey's Arcade. I would walk there, and the way I would compete was the leaderboard on the screen. So you get to put your 3 initials up there, and that's what you'd have. But these days, it's quite a bit different, right? I mean, I don't know. What's your early competitive experience in gaming?
So I'm a little bit younger, 24, and so I grew up with the kind of local neighborhood, everyone gathered around a 4-player console like an N64, Super Smash Brothers, and of course with the advent of the Xbox and PS2 and System Link, LAN parties were all the rage. So get a bunch of people together, one room, and this was before online services started taking the world by storm. So we didn't have the being able to connect with anyone around the world instantly. So it was more localized and less score-based and more multiplayer competitive. 2 people or 4 people going at each other in real time.
Yeah, and I think kind of the third part is online, right? So it started 1 person, 1 machine, leaderboard, then multiple people, physical space, and then thank goodness the internet came along. So now you and I could play with or against each other, even though we're in different houses. And that's maybe chapter 3 of esports. And now we're in chapter 4, where other people can watch us play over platforms like Twitch and esports. And so now it's truly global.
I think the natural progression and evolution of video games as a medium and art form is kind of giving off this secondary effect, maybe this tangential effect, where games have become very cinematic. The graphics are incredible, and a lot of the people in the artistic pipeline are those from film, and some of those skill sets are transferable, like 3D animation and modeling. And so some of these games, whereas back in the mid-2000s, to an untrained eye or a parent, they wouldn't necessarily know what was going on, now are a lot more visually and aesthetically pleasing, and it's almost like watching a TV show or a sport. And some people can just watch it for the pure enjoyment of how it looks in the action, regardless of the very high-level skills that are going on at the same time.
So you're saying me as a square dot in Adventure on the 2600 was not visually compelling?
Well, art is subjective. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about gaming is it's set up to let you experiment, because the consequence for failure is not all that bad, right? You're not going to break a bone, you're not going to get hurt. And so in the same way, I really see gaming as it's problem solving done in a fun way. And so of course, you know, when I looked at my own kids and how much gaming they were doing, a lot of it was around, well, what is this displacing? Like for us, it was always important to actually get some physical activity and run around outside, but a lot of what it was displacing was more passive consumption of watching TV and just sitting there. And at the end of the day, the number one thing that makes games different from every other form of media is you are the protagonist. It's agency. You make choices. That's what makes game different from everything else, and I think that's a great thing for young people to learn, agency.
I think an active mind is a learning mind, and I've been of that same belief that, you know, even being young and growing up with my family all huddled around the movie, I don't know if I was ADD or just loved games better, but I would never finish the movie. I'd go upstairs and play video games because I was always actively engaged in problem solving, basic skills, strategy, community, deal, with your friends and stuff like that. So there is a much more interactive sense, and that's, really what a game is. It's that sense of interaction and sense of community as well.
Yeah.
As you mentioned.
So speaking of taking control of your destiny and agency, let's shift and talk just a bit about entrepreneurship, right? So you've been doing some projects recently. I've had some projects in my past. I don't know, what have you learned so far about the world of entrepreneurship?
Well, so I will say one thing, and to reference a personal hero of mine, Gabe Newell, is these things, they take time. And one thing, and that's also part of growing up as well, is to realize how long things take. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and you have to prepare, you have to plan, and you have to make sure you have your definitions of what your mission is clearly defined and stick to them. So I've been developing video games, and I'm getting into publishing video games and helping fund them and things like that. So I've just realized it's important to, that also that old adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know, also rings true as well. It's so important to get out there, and even though the virtual world is great, it is important to get out in the real world, go to networking events, connect to people, talk to people, take, random jobs here and there. If you're an entrepreneur, you do freelance, Of course, there's a line when you say no, to a job, but don't say no too often. Try to say yes to anything, just because it's all about opening doors. So for me, it's been kind of growing a lot of experience and, developing a wide knowledge portfolio. And that all helps. And sometimes in that journey, it may feel like what I'm doing doesn't have anything to do with my initial goal, but it really does. And it's helped me in my experience of developing video games and things like that to have those experiences to pull from.
Our company Skillshot is really all about that. How can we deliver esports and gaming with positive impact on people's characters and make the world a little better?
Absolutely. So Georgia, there are some misconceptions about what we do here, but it's growing and it's rising as one of the most important and powerful places for esports and video game development and things like that. And esports is now getting into the school system, and I know you know a lot about this, so if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit on that.
Yeah, you're right, Ben. The other hat I wear when I'm not doing my day job is chair of something called the Atlanta eSports Alliance, and I think it shows the thought leadership of Georgia, because every major city has something like a sports commission or sports council. They try to win the Super Bowl, which we were fortunate enough to host in Atlanta, but this city and state actually has taken that to esports. So the Atlanta eSports Alliance is a division of the Sports Council. So in the same way we're talking to FIFA about bringing the World Cup here as part of North America, we're talking to, say, Riot Games about hosting the championship for League of Legends. And so, it kind of brings up false stereotypes about gaming and often about Georgia. I travel a lot globally, and I think people don't realize how much of a technology leader this state is. So of course, we're here talking to one another in the Computer Museum of America in Roswell, Georgia, and surrounded by really a collection of great items that preserve the history of computing. And but that's not the only way that this state is leading. So when it comes to esports, Georgia was one of the first 5 states in the nation to adopt gaming, playing video games, as an officially sanctioned high school sport. So I don't know, did you earn a letter jacket in high school? You're a pretty big guy.
I did not. I played a little bit of football,
Okay.
but I had to ask my coach what a tackle was.
All right. So,
we did not grow up with sports at all in my household. It was all music and art and video games.
So you could earn, if you rewound a little bit, and this program was there, you could earn that jacket in 3 games. You know, they're all content appropriate for teens. So right now it's League of Legends, it's Rocket League, and Homegrown Smite from High Res Studios that are all, you know, really kind of friendly in terms of content and all emphasize teamwork. And I think what's been so interesting to see here in Georgia and really all over the nation is this has brought in a cohort of kids that would otherwise not have attachment with the school, and it's also resulted in better student outcomes. So for instance, we know kids are playing these games anyway, but they might be playing them at home, right, connected online. But the way these programs are run, you play them on campus, and so you're learning teamwork, you're learning mastery, communication, good sportsmanship, you know, how to be a good winner, not a sore loser. And so all these sort of values that I know I wanted my kids to develop through traditional sports are now being delivered through eSports, and they're reaching kids that would otherwise have no affiliation with the school. So now they're proud to play on behalf of their school. And in many cases, because there's a GPA average, they've actually got to bring up their in-school performance in order to play, when otherwise they might have been disaffected. So that's amazing. And the other thing that's amazing is how accessible it is, right? It's not specific to gender, race, height. Anybody can play. And I know we had a story specific to Smite where I spoke to a young man who was so proud that he was able to play, and the school was actually doing really, really well and on their way to a state championship. And this young man, Daniel, was confined to a wheelchair. So he used the words life-changing because now he could take part in this activity and kids were looking at him, you know, like they never had before, right? That kind of pride.
That is life-changing, and that is something that just is a testament of how progressive Georgia really is, and it levels the playing field. That's true diversity when you have, it's not just, you know, a certain group of people in a sport per se, but it's many different walks and paths of life. You know, people who are disenfranchised that aren't able to participate in a sport, you know, physically, you know, that have brilliant active minds. You know, I grew up with an uncle with severe cerebral palsy, and so I grew up in the nursing home feeding him and, you know, shaving him and giving haircuts and growing up around disability. And he had a brilliant mind, and he couldn't really talk either. He could formulate kind of emotions and noises, but he had a brilliant mind, and he would even help me with my math homework. Is this the answer, Stephen? And he would light up, and he was right, and he was a brilliant mind that was trapped in this body. And if I could only go back and put a VR headset on him so he could feel like what it would be like to fly, you know? And so you have a lot of brilliant minds that aren't able to participate in those mainstream sports, that this is just a gateway to a whole nother world of opportunity and possibility that allows for people, you know, on the spectrum or disabled, you know, to be able to play and participate and compete and have these life-changing experiences.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that brings up, as you use the term gateway, right, is, of course, there could be physical limitations, or there could be just a degree of lack of access, right? I mean, this is the national conversation these days, right, is how do we make sure we're expanding that? And so one of the things that also happened here in Georgia a couple years ago when we did host the Super Bowl, our company was fortunate to partner with Steve Young, Jerry Rice. For younger kids, they may not know, they're really, really good at football. And they were here, and ahead of the Super Bowl, we worked with them to open up in downtown Atlanta, just a block from the state capitol, an eSports STEM center. So public school kids who might not have access to the internet or a great computer at home could visit that and practice eSports for free, and also get exposed to STEM, right? So centers like that, where video games get you in the door, but then you get exposed to the whole world of computing and computer programming and graphic design and production. So these sort of centers, like where we are, surrounded by, you know, these amazing computing devices, they tend to inspire young minds no matter where they come from. And so that's another reason I'm an esports evangelist, is because I see that those things lead to good jobs in the future, and we want those opportunities to be available to the broadest group possible.
It was fantastic talking with you today. Thank you for joining us at the Computer Museum of America in Roswell, Georgia. You know, we are preserving history here and opening opportunities for you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. You can find me, Todd Allen Harris, on the Twitters, on the LinkedIns. So yeah, learn about esports, and let's conquer the world together.